Hey everybody, Seth Campbell here with the new Segue Says podcast. This week we have a couple of very story-centric songs. One from Bob Dylan and the other from Genesis. The Bob Dylan song is probably my single favorite Bob Dylan song, although there are quite a few. Tangled Up in Blue. And the Genesis song is called I Know What I Like, and then in parentheses, In Your Wardrobe. I realize the title forms a complete sentence, but they're actually from two different parts of the chorus. Anyway, both songs are centric to story and characters, and there are a lot of characters in each. Tangled Up in Blue is, I believe, mostly autobiographical with a fair amount of artistic license on Bob Dylan's part. It's a story of sort of a star-crossed romance, following through several stages from first meeting, through complications with one person's previous marriage, to being on the run, to meeting up randomly again, to having to split amongst civil unrest, and then eventually trying to meet up again. It's 7 verses, and on most days, I don't have a problem with the lyrics. So, in spite of the fact that when there are a lot of verses, if it's a linear story, it's a lot easier to do, which this one is. And I Know What I Like is... It's a little harder to decipher. It's a sung from the perspective. It's from the Genesis album "Selling England by the Pound," which was meant to be sort of a very old-timey British atmosphere to it. And the story is from the perspective of a young man who's the hired lawnmower for a wealthy estate, basically. And it's him talking about all the people he sees around the estate and the people who got him the job in the first place, and how he's also falling for the young lady of the house, hence the In Your Wardrobe reference that comes on later in the chorus. And there is one point where the lyric says, I'm just a lawnmower, and a lot of people thought, because this being Genesis, and they'd done weird songs, including something called Harold the Barrel, which is a long story in itself, that this meant a literal lawnmower, as in the piece of machinery, and so that kind of distorted it. That said, this was also the Genesis first. It was close to being what you could consider a hit single, and in retrospect, it has become one. And it's one of the few songs that could be described as a single with Peter Gabriel when he was still as the lead vocalist. Genesis. Carpet Crawlers eventually became one in a subsequent re-release. But that's all beside the point. So those are the stories behind the stories. Now we go on to the songs themselves. Both are in the key of A major, but with a mixolydian touch. So that means the natural G, as opposed to the... So there's a slightly harder edge to it. Not quite bluesy, but that's what would make it blues, is that it's the one chord tends to be a dominant 7 rather than just a major. Now, Tangled Up in Blue, the original version, the vamp, if you will, for the first part of the verse and between verses is actually A to G over A. Just A to G. And so a verse would be the first part. This is a verse-refrain song, but each verse has 2 distinct sections to it. So the verse would be, early one morning the sun was shining, I was lying in bed, wondering if she had changed it all, if her hair was still red. The folks said our lives together sure was gonna be rough. Never did like Mama's homemade dress, Papa's bank book wasn't big enough. This is the second part of the verse. I was standing on the side of the road, the rain falling on my shoes, heading down for the East Coast. Lord knows I paid my dues to get through. Tangled up in blue. But I actually play this slightly differently. Well, in addition, of course, since it's Bob Dylan, the verse would actually sound something like it. Anyone morning sun was shining, and was light in bed. I won't torture you with that anymore. I really do love Bob Dylan, but the voice is a caricature that just I can't resist. But rather than A to G, and particularly this 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 that rhythm, there's a way that the Brew played this in a cover show. It was actually well, it wasn't a cover show. They covered it in a show that was the first show I ever played with them. And rather than go to a G, they went to an A sus4, which means you play an A chord with a D instead of the C sharp. And they used this nice little rhythm to it. So that's the way I like to play it. And it really doesn't make much of a difference in the context of the song. And I'll sing a verse this way. Early one morning the sun was shining, I was lying in bed, wondering if she had changed it all, if her hair was still red. Her folks said our lives together sure was gonna be rough. Never did like Mama's homemade dress, Papa's bank book wasn't big enough. And then this part is the same. I like to do it that way. It really doesn't matter which way you do it, but that's a fun alternative to consider. And both will work equally well in relation to I Know What I Like. So, I Know What I Like is, as I said, it was the first thing approaching a single for Genesis because it was one of the first, I guess, cohesive pop-ish sounding songs. They were doing, in this era in particular, their early stuff is very prog rock, pastoral, almost neoclassical to some level. Very bizarre stuff. This is one album after a 26-minute, 9-part saga called Supper's Ready. So obviously that was not going to be a single. But this album, they started to become a little more pop-friendly, although there were still some prog rock highlights on it, such as Cinema Show, which is considered by fans one of the greatest of that era. But this one is slightly more sensible, but it's still got that strange Genesis Old English pastoral feel to it. And it begins with, well, actually with the sound of a lawnmower. And then a drum groove kicks in and a low sustained A. And there's some spoken stuff. And then the verse, which I'll demonstrate one arc of the verse chorus in a moment. The verse is mainly variations on A with susses and sevens. So basically, playing this solo rather than having 5 band members with very specific parts, you have to figure out what sounds right for you. So I'm just, as far as those chords. But it's mainly just A's, G's over A's, and A's with a sus. So, hence, particularly even, as I said, with both options of Tangled Up in Blue, you got A, G, or A sus. So, we're working in similar fields already. Now, this is the opening through the first chorus of I Know What I Like. It's 1 o'clock and time for lunch. Hum-dee-dum-dee-dum-dum-dum. As the sun beats down and I lie on the bench, I can always hear them talk. There's always been Ethel. Jacob, wake up, you gotta tidy your room now. And Mr. Lewis, isn't it time he was out on his own? Over the garden wall, 2 little leopards, cuckoo to you. Keep them mowing blades sharp, I know what I like. And I like what I know. It's getting better in your wardrobe. Stepping one beyond your show. La 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 la. So as you can, it's very quirky, very unusual, but it's all pretty centric around this A. The chorus goes through a few different chords. But then it just resolves to this. And it also ends, in fact, the whole thing is centered a bit around this Steve Hackett guitar line. So that's going on pretty much the whole time, establishing this. And so if you wanted, and you're not going to connect these two parts directly, but if you did want to use the original Tangled Up in Blue, 1, 2, 1, 2, you got that same sort of consistent rhythm. So that would stretch over both songs, even though you're not going to be connecting one to the other directly. So just a thought. Now, the way I know what I like ends is after the second chorus, which is, there's only 2 verses, 2 choruses. With second chorus is a double, so you have a getting better in your wardrobe, stepping one beyond your show. Calms back down to this droning A again. I believe Hackett's guitar line continues. There's another spoken part. As the sun beats down and I lie on the bench, I can always hear them talk. Me, I'm just a lawnmower. You can tell me by the way I walk. And then there's a new instrumental vamp at the end. Which again, it's just basically over A, with the 7th and the sus coming in an occasion. Basically, it fades out there. So, now we've established the parameters. Here's the way to do this. I like to start with Tangled Up in Blue because it's longer, and so that way the segue feels a little more natural rather than starting with something really short going into something longer when you want the stories to both be heard. So, you start with Tangled Up in Blue, and because to an American audience, at least, they're probably more likely to know Tangled Up in Blue. Might be different in England. But, since I'm not performing in England, I'll leave that up to any British viewers I may have. And if I do have British viewers, I apologize for the accent in the spoken word parts. I was trying to imitate the original Peter Gabriel recording. Don't know how well I did. Anyway, you have the way Tangled Up in Blue ends. Is also a fade out, but there's a way I like to end it, which is, of course, also the way the Brew ended it. You have the last verse refrain, so starting from the B part, if you will, of the last verse. Me, I'm still on the road, I'm headed for another joint. We always did feel the same, we just saw from a different point of view. Tangled up in blue. Blue. Tangled up in blue. Sort of a tag ending. And then instrumental in the last one. Kind of a slow down end. Now, for the purpose of the segue, you're going to do the same thing, but not slow it down. Because as I mentioned, the songs are at the same, basically the same tempo. And I Know What I Like starts with a drum beat and a drone A at that same rhythm. So you don't want to slow down and speed right back up when you're already at the right pace. So you could basically just do the same ending without slowing down. Tangled up in blue. Let the drone of the A set in. It's 1 o'clock and time for lunch. Hum-dee-dum-dee-dum. The sun beats down and I lie on the bench. I can always hear them talk. There's always been Ethel. And there you are. Now, if you wanted to go the other way, you could do, basically, you have this jam at the end that's basically at your disposal. So depending on whether you're doing it the original Bob Dylan way or the other way that I've demonstrated here, you could just begin that in the middle of these this little melody riff here. That's the first way, or the second way would be. It's the original Bob Dylan way. But it's basically the same thing. In between that melody is on an A chord, so you just throw in the A sus and the G every couple beats, as you would at the beginning of the Bob Dylan song. So it's just this little melody that's different. And then at some point you drop the melody and start the lyrics, like so. Early one morning the sun was shining, I was lying in bed, wondering if she changed at all, if her hair was still red. And there you are. Now, if you wanted to start with Tangled Up in Blue, go to I Know What I Like, but find a nice way to end I Know What I Like that also does a bit of a callback to Tangled Up in Blue. You could do something I believe I mentioned briefly, which is you don't start singing the first song again, but you do cameo it in instrumental concept. So basically, instead of the verse of Tangled Up in Blue, you just start playing the tag ending without any lyrics. So that's the where I'd be repeating Tangled Up in Blue, Tangled Up in Blue, but you just don't add the lyrics. So you have you're at the end of I Know What I Like, which is me, I'm just a lawnmower. You can tell me by the way I walk. You can jam on this for any length of time you so choose. Particularly in a band setting, this will work well. And then this time you do the slowdown, the last time. Brings it to a nice dramatic conclusion. Now, of course, I just did the tag ending 4 times, but you don't even have to do that. You could just do the G, D, A, just the once. So, you know, jamming over this section. You come to the point you want to end it. Totally a matter of taste, whether you want to make a clear cameo of the first song or if you just want a nice ending that happens to tie in. So, totally up to you. In any event, thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next week.